All right.
I'm going to wing it.
Yeah, that's fair, cool. Yeah, no, that's
That's
working.
working.
Yeah, no, it's good.
till about a minute ago. So I'm the MC. Welcome to CPS. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorials in inverted commas next door, and there was a few Photoshop gems imparted, so that's a good start. Who went to the workshops during the weekend? How many here? Was it good? Everybody happy? Yeah, I think it went down really well. There weren't too many sandwiches left over, which was a bit of a bonus when I saw how big the pile was at the start. So that's a well done effort in eating all those things. So that is a good thing. One more to go. There's probably one space if anybody hasn't been on one and would like to go to the bird workshop in 2 weeks' time. So just let me know if you would like to do that. Yeah, so welcome to CPS. Usual things about exit doors, go back out the way you came, turn your phone off, and anything else that has been said every week, but I can't remember because I didn't write down my list of things to say. The only other thing I want to add tonight is there's no supper tonight because they've pulled the kitchen apart. Hopefully that'll mean that the kitchen's real flash, and it's going to be really good from next week on. The RCC said to us that they had an opportunity that sort of popped out of nowhere to get it done, so they said yes please. So they've been waiting for that kitchen to be done up, so that'll be a step in the right direction for us. So tonight's program, something a bit different and a bit special. How many of you who have ever thought about or done any sort of semi-professional work, or made some photographs for somebody and been asked, can I have it, what should I do, and had to think a little bit about, what's the value in this? That could be you shot a wedding, you've shot some portraits of somebody, you've hung a picture up in the local cafe, and you're basically getting yourself out there. It's something quite a lot of us sort of push and move towards. If you've ever thought about that, then tonight's the night for you, because we're going to hear a little bit about the whole process of what's involved in stepping towards the industry side of photography. It's all very well and good for us because we focus ourselves on pleasing a judge. When you're pleasing a client, it's probably something that takes a little bit of extra thinking. So Tony Stewart is going to talk to us tonight about moving towards the industry and professional photography. Tony's a Grand Master of the NZIPP. That sounds pretty exciting and awe-inspiring, so that's what he is. And he runs a portrait photography business in Christchurch and does a lot of work for Anna, I'm told. So the main supporter of Trimble, or Trimble's the main supporter of him, or I'm not sure quite how it works out. But anyway, I think we're going to have a really good night tonight, and please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tony Stewart.
Thank you, Ian. Is that working? Good. Look, thank you very much for having us along there, team. And apparently the reason why there's no sandwiches tonight is that I think you ate them at the weekend by the sounds of it. So, and I think, is that Mike in the audience I'm seeing there as well? And Mike and Paul, a little bit of a variation on the talk we've given to NZIP at our conference back in August. So I have changed it, so it's a little bit different, but same, but different. So tonight, I think we've got, they only said, you said 2.5 hours. As long as we're out by 11:30, we should be, no. My promise to Ian is that if I do an hour, that's good. Hour and a quarter is probably enough to wrap it up. So that's my promise to you. And we'll see how it goes. And if you've got any questions, you're welcome to interrupt us at any time, okay? What I'll do, I'll go through and just tell you a little bit about my background, and just so that might be of interest. And then I'll explain about my work, and then some observations in working in industry and the likes there. And tonight, really, you'll take out what you want from it. It's not for me to preach and to tell you things. For some of you, you may never have any desire to be working in industry or selling. But I think we've all had those friends and family that say, oh, can you come along and take pictures at the park of my kids? Or do you mind just doing my niece's wedding? Or, your boss at work knows you've got a camera. Can you go and take pictures of the staff function? That's as much where we're heading and talking tonight as it is going out and putting a, branded car together and pitching yourself. So if you've ever had those requests, I think this kind of information should be of interest to you as well. So I'll kick off. I grew up in Ashburton, and my family had a business. For some of the people in Canterbury may even recognise it, Stewart and Holland, which was an electrical business. My grandfather started it in 1934 from memory. He went off to the war in the Air Force with radar and electronics, and my dad took it over, and he's now retired and sold the business. So that's sort of what I didn't do, but the opportunity was there, was to carry on the generation. And I'm very grateful for the fact that, I was able to choose a different path with my parents' blessing, and went and did university and teachers college. So I went off down to Otago, having had first year at Canterbury, and I did education degree in psychology, consumer applied science, and teachers college, thinking I was going to head into food and to nutrition and teaching, which I subsequently did. Actually, before I went out teaching, I also joined up with the Army, and I had a background in scouting through formative years, and that was a natural progression to get some money together as a part-time job, and started off cooking, and that was pretty tough actually. I didn't like that one, but it was fairly arduous and hot and long days, and it was, you imagine working in the Army, it wasn't always the most favourable conditions. But I was with a medical unit, and then we changed and did medic training and had a lot more fun. And that was an exercise we did over in Vanuatu, and we went over there. It was civil aid, so it was with Department of External Affairs. So we went out in the bush and, with dental team and engineers, and looked after folk, and that was giving some inoculations way out in the sticks, way out in the bush, still people with bows and arrows and stuff hanging around. But it was that, when I went on this exercise, kind of the same thing as I kind of described to you before. The commanding officer knew I had a camera and was quite keen on it, and asked me to take some pictures. So I was doing these photos for was Army intelligence of bridges and rivers and the places we were going. They wanted to document it. And I think if you look at it today, they'd have satellites doing all this stuff, I'm certain of it, and they don't need me on the back of a Hilux ute taking pictures of muddy creeks. But back in the day, they wanted it, So I kind of thought that was kind of neat. That was my first job. And all they really got out of it, all I got out of it, they just paid for processing and got twin prints, and they thought it was Christmas. But that was my kind of first job. Then while I was still studying, I got to do a very fortunate experience down at Antarctic, my second to last year. So I applied for a job working for a Kiwi company that had cooking and cleaning contract. Because at that stage I was still looking at going into catering and food and all nutrition, that kind of stuff. So I worked for American Navy at a place called Williams Field. And that was the C-130 base for most of the South Pole operations. So they were doing fuel. They'd go from Christchurch to McMurdo or to Willie Field, and then they'd do mainly a fuel run to the South Pole station in the very middle of the Antarctic, to try and get that up to speed with all the supplies for the winter season. So there was Hercules coming and going all the time. You can see some there on the runway, and this is I get confused if it's must be 180. Panoramic, looking down the main street. It's sort of the main street here that carries on down this way as well. And that's Mount Erebus in the centre in the background. So we're right at the sort of the base of the mountain, and McMurdo and Scott Base are sort of back out sort of this way here. So I was very lucky, and that was an opportunity again when I was sort of 21 to have a camera and to go out and take pictures that I thought was pretty neat. So it's a bit of a gift to go there. But I look back now and I think it's almost a bit of an opportunity wasted, because I think if I know what I know now, I would have loved to. But anyway, But I kind of got the interest going. And we certainly worked hard and we played hard and got up to a few hijinks and had a great time. Then I came back, finished teachers college, and then went teaching. And this was not my first school, but it's actually my third school. It was in Napier. And I put this picture in for several reasons, but also like someone sold that picture on a hell of an angle. And I think, goodness, I wonder if you get away with that these days, you know what I mean? It's like, but someone obviously did. And then went overseas and did my OE. And this was a school in Knightsbridge, having taught supply teaching, like, relief in other parts of London. This is sort of the last school. I actually overstayed in my visa to kind of keep on with this school. And we're very lucky. It was It was a private international school. We had lunches put on and term bonuses. There was no curriculum meetings. It was almost like pure teaching that you kind of, everyone trains for, you know, I mean, like, without the bullshit, you know, and it was good. And there's kids there from all around the world. Every one of those children from a different country. And I think of those, only one's probably a Brit. You know, the rest were French, Italian, Nigerian, Croatian, American, you name it. So it was great. It was actually, I was going to say Prince Charles, it's now King Charles's. It was his old primary school, but it wasn't Eton or anything swanky. It was just, you know, just like a nice school. So again, I was sort of heading on this path teaching, and then went overseas travelling as part of that, and again, sort of that extension of the Antarctic. Loved the opportunities that came from, I think probably could be about 80 countries. You know, from, you know, northern Arctic through to as far south as you've seen before, Antarctica, and a lot of places in between. But a big part was in Africa, and one of the trips we did there was 6 months. That actually started from Egypt, into Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, which, you know, these days was Syria. You know, you just never get to, you know, and looking back, I'm just fortunate to see those places, and you think it's just a shame, just think it's just been absolutely wrecked. And when we were in Egypt, about ready to get on the truck and head further south, that was I don't know if some people remember, this is going back to late 90s. It was the first shooting at Luxor, and we now know it was Al-Qaeda, but back then it was just massacre, and there's about 80 people killed at the Temple of Hatshepsut, I think it was. So we're in a holding pattern, ready to go. I think, what are we going to do? We're going to keep travelling? Is the tour still going to go ahead? And but we committed to it, and we went, and it was probably the best time to go to Egypt. And, you know, Valley of the Kings, there was just no one there, you know, 10, 20 people, you know. So to have a place like that with your camera and have the opportunity was, despite the circumstances being tragic for those that had been there previously, we had the country to ourselves. Heading on south, this is actually in Ethiopia, in Lalibela, Feast of the Epiphany, which is one of the highlights of the Ethiopian annual calendar, where people get all dressed up, and they have these rock-hewn churches. Some of you may have been there, but where this is, I mean, this is remote stuff. This is sort of, not many white people get to go and see this, let alone have the festivities and stuff that are there. So again, the opportunity to be there and to see this almost National Geographic stuff in front of you with a camera was enough to think, oh, actually, I think I quite like this. And you'll see down the bottom there, travelling through, you know, Eritrea and that part of Ethiopia, there's all these tanks and sort of debris of war and all that kind of stuff, which I just found fascinating. Anyway, keep going down all the way through Africa, and got to the bottom, and that was 6 months. And in that 6 months, I think we had about 10 days in campgrounds. The rest of it was all riverbeds and free camping and waking up with elephants and lions and carrying on. It was brilliant. And then went back up through Namibia. And if anyone's been on a photo tour to Namibia, or, you know, you need to put it on your bucket list. Certainly I'd go back in a flash. And that was really the time I thought, actually, you know, this is actually what I really like doing and where I want to head. So I came back to New Zealand after a bit more travelling around through Asia, and now what am I going to do? You know, I need some money in my pocket, but I've got no money. So is this a good time to kind of be a struggling tortured artist or retrain? And I applied for my job back in Napier and was offered that back as head of department. Got a job, I got money, or am I going to go and be a poor student? And I chose being a student, so I went to Ara and studied at Polytech and did 1 year there. And looking back now, like, it was probably the best decision I made, but it was not easy at the time. And so I did 1 year there, and then near the end of that 1 year, picked up a job working for another photographer, and she was one of the first to have medium format phase 1 camera. So it was at the very cusp of that transition from film through to digital when that came through. So that was a huge learning curve for us. And we were shooting a lot of catalogues for Ballantynes and Kimberleys and Posty Pass, and a lot of those, some of those are still going now. A lot of them have also folded. But I didn't really enjoy the fashion side of things. That wasn't my cup of tea at all. And a lot of people I was training with wanted to do sports and fashion, and they were falling over themselves, and here I was doing it, thinking, it's not actually what's driving me. So I've been self-employed now for 22 years. I first started in the year 2000. Probably a big enough picture of me. I did do 10 years part-time back at ARA, having finished, and I taught business studies there for probably about 10 years part-time. So kind of straddled that photography teaching, and, did that. These are just a range of kind of the work that I do. And it's pretty much just myself, and I have an event team that work for me, and I've now got 2 part-time assistants who tend to do a lot of the post-production and computer work for me. A lot of the work is people-based. I'd say probably 95% of it. So, Ian, your intro was very kind. I don't really see myself as being portrait photographer yet. In actual fact, quite a lot of it actually is. But I don't see myself as doing that traditional family portrait in one sense. Bit of Trimble stuff down there, bottom right there too. You recognise Anna? Yeah, that's actually Felicity modelling, which is the only time she's ever modelled. I've caught her out. And, anything from, business profiles, formal, casual, events, conferences, speakers. This one down the bottom, do we have any lawyers in the room? That's right. Was it a hand? No. I've got to be careful what I say sometimes. But this was the Canterbury Law Society, and they wanted a picture of the judges and lawyers and all the people that belong to that. And it was planned, this is a bit of a side story, it was planned for months and months and months. And you can see there, looking at the ground, it was wet, it was raining, this picture was taken in the rain, and the judges had, of course, their fancy, there's probably a special name for their wigs and their gowns on. We had a wet weather plan, but the Justice Precinct had not long opened, it only opened a few months, and the security staff had got their buddy knickers in a knot, and they didn't want to cooperate. They were actually on a go to work to Raw, and they weren't going to do anything extra to let all these people, even though most of them worked in the Justice Precinct, they refused to process them through security to go into the courtyard, into the foyer, where we had all lined up. So we had months and months planning what we're going to do, wet, fine, all this kind of stuff. And on the day said, no, we were going to take what was going to be 600 people. Well, it's probably only about 400 in the end. And we had them there. And added to that, and that's why I was asking if there's any lawyers in the room, I didn't quite realise that, the High Court and the Maori Land Court and the Supreme Court and all the other courts and people involved with, there's a lot of bloody chickens. There's a real pecking order. And this person didn't want to stand next to this person. This person needs to be behind this person. They're going to get upset if they go next to her and him, and bloody hell. So what looks like it's a gaggle of people, it really is quite an orchestrated. I remember Tony Corbell spoke a few years at one of our conferences, who worked for the UN, and he did a picture of all the delegates at the UN, and he was saying how long that took to get that picture. And they said they had a run sheet for who's going to stand next to who. That was updated 15 minutes a time, because at that stage Rwanda wasn't talking to Angola, and Angola wanted to stand next to this person. And then if the Chinese spoke next to Taiwan, there's going to be fisticuffs. They said this was a mission. They said so they were, and then apparently some bloke walked down on the picture, who was. And his lanyard was some kingdom of something, right? He made this shit up, and he wasn't even a delegate. And that was the day the Secret Service were fired, because this guy should never have actually been in the building, let alone in this picture. And so he had a better story than I did. But anyway, right. So I'm a bit of a generalist, and I've worked through all the time we've had GFC, we've had COVID, we have quakes and stuff. And these are some pictures I took on the residential red zone, purely for interest. And I think for some of you here in the room that have been active in that time, you realise how much of a mess it was. I hope we've learned some lessons as a country, as a district, as a town, on the value of documentary work and the likes there. And without getting political and stuff there, we missed an opportunity to have some really talented people go in and document what is New Zealand's biggest natural disaster. And there's people like Sir Glenn Howie and the likes that went off and did it off their own back. And I kind of did the same here, where I actually had access to the red zone through Housing New Zealand, that, kind of let me get into some of it. But the places I wasn't really supposed to be. But this is basically as houses were left, before they were demolished in the red zone. And like, I just found it fascinating. They got these sort of like single items, totally as people walked out of their houses. But I think it's just a fascinating study in what was that post-quake Christchurch. And then I think the one thing I'd say from that is that, having been through that, like many of you here, that, the sun still shines. We're still here today, and that there's adversity, but we chug on through it, and it's a matter of actually just battening down the hatches and hanging in there. And like most things in life, I think the opportunities are there if you look for it. And I think for those people, and I guess in the room today, the content is photography, is that, if you are keen and you're dedicated and you're good at what you do, you'll always get there, and I think sometimes it'll be tough times, but it's a matter of actually realising that if it's what you're passionate about and it's what your goal's going to be and you're committed, then it can happen. And this is my first conference I went to for NZIP, which to me was a big game changer. And I think your conferences will be the same. They'll be kind of the equivalent of getting together with like-minded people and talking, lenses and apertures and all the bits and pieces that we do. Believe it or not, I think often we get together and look at Mike and Paul. We actually don't talk about that stuff. We talk about everything else but cameras sometimes, I think. I was also involved with our local NZIP, and I was on Honours Council, which is running their awards for about 5 years, and co-authored the World War II Veteran Project, which some of you may have seen or even had family members involved with, which I think is probably one of the most satisfying things I've done in my career as in professional photography. It was purely by love. It was an altruistic project where we got photographers around the country set out to document, almost by accident, it wasn't supposed to be, but the kind of way it turned out, every living World War II veteran we could. And of course, we look out there now and think actually we actually have very, very few left. So we kind of got in the nick of time to kind of, again, capture this body of work that I think is an asset to the nation. And again, without getting too political on it, I'm somewhat saddened to think the likes of National Portrait Gallery, Te Papa, basically didn't want to know about it, which I just think sort of, you've got this resource given basically for free that, is a labour of love by so many people. Yet Auckland War Museum, they've picked it up and, cherish it. Done awards for a number of years. I'll just quickly go through these. I'm probably prattling a bit much. And a bit like yourself, when you do your associateship and the likes there, you start off and you kind of have a few ideas, and then you kind of get bigger and you get a bit more confidence, and then before you know it, you kind of think, oh, this is pretty good. And, before you know, you kind of get there. And I guess that was my journey through for Grandmaster and stuff as well. Right, so that's pretty much my background and my journey and what kind of spun my wheels to get to where I am today. So any questions there? This one here, that's the Rakaia post office. You probably read that. So if you drive past Rakaia, go on the right-hand side on the hillside, and that's sitting there for you to see. Back in the day, it would have been 1910, there you go. That's 112 years old. That would have been the grand old post office with the BNZ opposite, and the town would have been, thriving. And you look at it now, it's sort of some old sort of, I don't even know if it's open, but someone's got shit in there and it's all paint flaky. And I just find it quite sad. But I kind of love that transition to old to new and that kind of abandoned sort of stuff. I kind of find a bit of a fascination with it myself, actually, that history and stuff. Yeah. Right, so I'll push on. I've got some observations just from working industry, and I hope that I can share some of those with you as a sort of an audience that may be looking to, dip your toes in transition and stuff like that. And I think sometimes we get advice on different things and we kind of think we know what we know, but in actual fact, it's what we don't know is what we actually need to be told. And I think for some of those things, I think for people that may be looking to develop their photography to the point where someone may be interested in buying it or hanging it or something like that, these are things that I think could help you. And the first thing I've noticed is that we're working in an industry that's very much based around people, whereas we often get caught up with the idea it's about our gear and how big our lens is and what kind of your Canon and your Nikon and your full frame and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff doesn't matter because it's actually about the connection with people, and it's about selling yourself, and it's about having the client base who is very loyal, like Sir Trimble, who want to have you back. That's equally important as any photographic skill. And I guess in one sense, that's the bit you can't actually be taught, and that to get on with people and to have those relations, that's as much a skill as it is working your camera. So look, for those people that think it's about going and doing your Photoshop stuff, yes, yep, you need to know that. It may also be as much about going to Toastmasters and getting a bit of confidence, and that may be as much to help you get involved with industry. The other thing, oh, sorry, I missed that. I was talking one slide ahead of myself, I'm sorry. This one, I can see it on my screen, but you can't. Think, what the hell is he on about? The next slide here, it's saying is that it's really important for people that may be looking at exploring their photography is to understand why you want to do that. And it sounds like I'm perhaps having a little bit of a being negative, but it's not my intent to put you off, rather than to get you to pause and to think, I love my photography, and I want to sell it, I want to put it in galleries, I want to do weddings, I want to do portraits, or whatever spins your dial. The reality is you need to be clear why you want to do that. Because if you do it for the wrong reasons, it can trip you up. And that is, it becomes this chore that you kind of enter into this bind of having then to please clients or to do jobs in which they might want you to do that's actually not what you want to do. And I think having an idea of a hand on a rudder and working out a direction, is it fine art, is it sports, is it documentary, I think is really helpful to consolidate the direction that you want to take your work. And particularly when it comes to weddings, I know a lot of people will do that because Saturdays might be available, but the reality is, if you've ever done a wedding and stuffed it up, or you've had some feedback that you missed a shot here and where's the one of Dad with the bride, you realise it's pretty stressful because you can't go back and do it again. So you've got to really know that actually, I want to be a wedding photographer. The reality is, you don't have to be a wedding photographer, you have to handle stress. You have to handle the ability of things that will go wrong. So these qualities are actually more important, or just as important, than being able to work your camera. Okay, so it's just rained. We're going to go to this place here. The car, they forgot to fill it up with petrol, so it's going to take 10 minutes off before. Oh, bloody hell. The bride just stopped in. I've had this, stopped in for a pie at the dairy, and I'm going, you're joking. You've got to be kidding. The same wedding. If it doesn't rain, it pours. The same wedding, the gas ran out on the barbecue. They're cooking off these things, and the gas ran out. So they had to go off and find some gas bottles. At that stage, the food that was half cooked was getting cold. The guests were getting more pissed. It had started raining. It was in a marquee. And the floor, they had like a dance floor with a, what do you call it, like a tarpaulin. That started filling up with water. It became like a swimming pool. It was worse than that. And it started off, it seriously was, it was a train wreck from the start. There was two limo companies turned up because they'd I don't know, I think the bride was not quite the flashiest, but she'd spoken to two companies. So they had two competing cars come to take the bride and the bridesmaid. In the end, both of them said, you can get stuffed, and they both left. The bridesmaids are all getting into the Cortina, jammed in with the bridesmaids and the flower girls to go off to this wedding. And the other bit, the MC at the service, he put his foot into it and invited everyone from the service back to the reception. Well, they're saying, no, there's 200 people here, we've got 80, the thing. So there's all these people turning up at the reception. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, you're not invited. So it was the wedding, and they never lasted. They didn't last long at all, which is probably no surprise given the flavour of the wedding. These are the sort of things, anecdotes you look back at. But that's the kind of, the stuff there, you get dealt with that on a wedding day. You're going, what the hell am I going to do? I'm being paid to watch this unfold. What really is a train wreck. Yet they still want pictures, they're dealing with all this and they're getting stressed and getting angry, and afterward I give them something they can hang on the wall, So those are the kind of things that, it's not always working with your family that know you and going to look after you and tell you your pictures are nice. It also, it's really important, I think, when you go into it, as with any business. So this is not actually particular to photography, but you could be working for a painter or a joiner, or buying a dairy, or whatever business opportunity that you have. But photography is no different. That you need to know your market, and that is who's going to pay you the money, who's going to buy your prints, your files, how much you're going to sell them for, what's your profit margin, how much you need to sell a week, per month, per year to pay your expenses. And this is the bit that, even as working photographers, most people really find hard, let alone without people breaking into market and having day jobs as comfort. Do you know what I mean? So if you've got other jobs and you kind of do a few pictures on the side, it really doesn't matter too much. That you're not going to lose your home over it. But as soon as you start doing it for real, for a job, you've got to start making these dots join up. And that's a really tough industry for a lot of people starting out, to try to work out who's going to pay the money, how much, when, to get these things happening. And a little bit of forethought, I think, can help you. And I've noticed that, particularly when I was at Polytech coming through, a lot of those people, as I said, like, wanted to do fashion. And, you know, that's great. I mean, and I have no problems with, you know, people's dreams and desires. But the reality is, what was the industry? Who's going to pay for the fashion stuff, particularly in Christchurch? Because it's not big. And a lot of those people starting out are also like you photographers, where they're young designers. They haven't got the budget and the cash flow. So you think, okay, that puts us back to a few notches. They haven't got the money and they're not going to pay. They kind of want to do contras, which is great from a portfolio, but it doesn't actually pay my bills. So that's the kind of quandary, you say, with fashion. And we found it was very similar with sport. And that, well, who's going to pay for your sports photos? Because I love doing rugby. Well, that's great. So you go to the stadium, to get through the door at the stadium, you know, the Hurricanes and the Crusaders and whatever, you know, part of the deal is they want pictures. So kind of your main client that you kind of could sell these pictures to are also the ones getting them for free, because otherwise, without them ticking the box, you can't get in the door to take the pictures. So you kind of come to this full story, a full circle. So knowing your market, knowing what spins your dials is really important. And particularly also with fine art and landscapes, you know, like we've all been down to stop off at Lake Bukaki and we've seen Mount Cook and the lovely reflections, but everyone's done it. Okay, so what are we going to do that someone hasn't done to sell the next picture? Because that one's been ticked off a zillion times, you know. And so who's going to buy that? You know, is there another art market that you can tap into? And I think when I first started, I had photos in a stock library, and that was probably about 10% of my income starting out, but that's all virtually dried up now. So buying photos through a library for money, for a lot of corporates, a lot of calendars, for postcards, for government departments, that's virtually gone. And that was a journey that started probably 10, 15, 20 years ago with the death knell with microstock and Getty and people buying images for $5, $10, you know, from bulk sites. And Getty, the other one, they saw the writing on the wall. You know, they're the ones that made money, not the photographers. They had these huge big libraries and bought them out, and they creamed it, but the individuals working the other end didn't see a lot of that money. So once you start going pro, then things change a bit. And I guess this is the other bit I'm sort of going to get you to reflect on, and that, you know, if you've got an income stream that you're happy with, the transition to working in industry is a very, very different kettle of fish when you don't have that safety net of security of income, either through wage, through salary, and making it fit together as a business. I'm not saying it's something that's worked for me, but for a lot of people I know that it's been a challenge, like many small businesses in New Zealand. So going out and doing some business education, as much as photographic education, would certainly be something I'd recommend to try and help that. Marketing, selling, social media, that would be a huge part of making any new small business and selling your work as much as it is working on your camera skills. A quote I've got here, I think it's a really interesting one to share with people, and that profit is the reason one goes into business, money is the reason one goes into business, and loving what one does is a perk of being in business. It's a bonus, but it's not the reason. So one of the confusing things we have is that we love what we do. Of course we love what we do as photographers. We're very passionate people. But once we start working in industry, we need to have something beyond that to have as our selling point to enable us to have the income and have the clientele to justify the fact that we are in business. So we need a point of difference. And that's something that a lot of us, even myself, find that quite a challenge to work out. What am I going to do different to the next bloke? What's my sandwich board going to have on it that the next fella left and right of me doesn't have? And I think having some thought on that is probably crucial for people that may be looking to transition from having sort of amateur work through to having it in a professional space. What am I going to offer the next person that I can't? Like, what are you going to offer that I can't, and vice versa? Probably covered that actually. Push forward a wee bit. There's a diagram here which is probably quite good if you haven't seen this before. And this is, again, this is Business Principles 101 as opposed to photography. You can have any two of these three elements, but you can never have three together. You can be fast and cheap, you can be good and fast, you can be good and cheap, but you can never have all three together. So working out where your balance may be, are you going to be good and cheap? Which actually means your delivery can be slow. You know what I mean? You can be fast and good, but then you need to have a premium for that. You're welcome to take some pictures of these if you wish, if you haven't seen this before, if you think it might be of value. You're the sum of more than just your gear. And by this we're saying that we have all this lovely kit, and sometimes we get sort of gear envy. And I'll show you this next slide. You might like this. You've got the evil clown drawing you down into the underworld. But you need to know how to use your gear. So having good gear is really important to be in industry, but also knowing what to do with it. And I'm thinking here more about, you know, lighting and flash and working out, posing, that stuff you need to invest in yourself rather than just buying the latest toys, because the toys themselves aren't going to take pictures, you know. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's some determinants that I've put together that may help distinguish between a sort of professional working industry and someone who's doing it for their own enjoyment and hobby. And these are some points which, if you haven't considered them before, maybe of use to you. And that is, you need to buy the best you can afford. And I guess that is also true for people working in an amateur space, but certainly in professional space, you know, there's no excuse for me not to have the best glass. I can't really turn up with acrylic kit lenses that come with my, you know, camera deal because it was the best deal. You know, I need something that's going to be sharp and perform in low light and bits and pieces. So my priorities for my spending were maybe a little bit different to try and make sure that if I'm going to put my good gear on a tripod, it's got to be sturdy. Therefore, I'm going to have to buy a bit bigger, and it's going to be a big, thick Manfrotto, and it's not going to be something that just Mum gave me for Christmas. Those things are actually, for those that ever had any gear fall over on a tripod, realise actually, yeah, you can learn the hard way. Something that's probably really important here for anyone that's doing anything that may be construed for money or kind, you need to have commercial insurance for your car and your gear. Now, this is a bit of a trap, and I think if anyone works in insurance here, you may better clarify just how nasty people are or how good they are. If you are working for any form of payment, monetary or kind, then if you have a claim for a camera or for a car, your policy may not be liable if it's on domestic insurance only. Okay, so you may not have been aware of that, but if an insurance company wants to play nasty, that's an out for them. Oh, so have you done weddings? Oh, yeah, did a couple last year. How many? Yeah, just the 2. Okay, you crashed your car? Yep. But you use your car for your weddings? Yep, but that was 2 months ago. So it's an out for them that you might get away with that. An insurance company might actually be quite okay and sort of be understanding. But just be aware there is the potential for that to happen. And particularly, again, if it's a bit more about your lenses or your camera and you drop it, and they say, oh, how'd you drop it? Well, it was my mate's 21st. Oh, yeah, what'd they do for that? Oh, they gave us a box of beer. Well, technically, you've got kind and you're working, you're there doing it, and it means beyond purely for love and altruism. So just be aware of it, okay? Standard terms and conditions is something as professionals we use to protect ourselves. These are forms which, there's another whole area here we're about to get into which you may or may not be aware, and that is the law of copyright. And for most of you, you may not be too worried, but as soon as a client commissions you to take some photos, they will own it from the point of you pressing the shutter. Now, some of you may not care, you may not be too worried. The reality is, though, if you don't own it, it is not yours. So as a working photographer, if I don't contract out of the 1994 Copyright Act, the photos are never mine to therefore own, which means if there's a problem with payment, how can I expect payment for something I don't own? Now, it doesn't quite work that way, because if there's an email trail, yes, look, you can still prove in court that there is an agreement of sorts to pay. But it opens up a can of worms. Okay, the photos that you have taken, why should someone else own those when it's your skill set and lighting and knowledge and commitment to learning that's created that? Morally, I think that's wrong. Okay, but that's not the base default in New Zealand law. Okay, so as working professionals, a lot of people don't. They should contract out of the 1994 Act by using standard terms and conditions. These are free through NZOPP or AIPA, the two professional bodies. They're actually public access. You can use them. Anyone in the room can access them online at their web pages and use them to cover yourself. Now, I don't expect after today you're going to go out there and understand that. There may be a little bit more education needed just to kind of get you up to speed with that. But be aware, it's free to use. You should be contracting out of the Act. They are there available for anyone, and that will just cover your backside in the event that you may be looking to sell your services. Backing up, I think we all should do that anyway, regardless of which space you're working in. And there's 3 backups for a reason, because you should have 3 sources to know that you've got yourselves in the event of fire, flood, burglary, that not all your eggs are in one basket, say in your home. So off-site storage, cloud storage, I think is highly recommended for anyone working in the space, but particularly professional. And I get it frequently, and the last one was last week, where I had a previous bride from 12 years ago. The granddad had died, and they wanted a picture from the wedding, and I can pull it out of archives, and gladly, they had that for the casket and the funeral, which I think is actually I find that quite a it's a very loving thing to be able to help people years on, to actually say, look, this is how I can help you as a professional, because I've backed up my work. Paying tax, well, yeah, we know about that. Charge accordingly. Again, one of the dilemmas that you have is that if you need commercial insurance, you're not going to be able to have that by not charging properly. So you kind of get on this treadmill a wee bit where you're kind of up the ante. You need to back up 3 times. Okay, you need to have a cloud policy. You then need to get probably Adobe Photoshop on subscription. Okay, and then you need to have another computer, because that runs on the latest one, which means then you need to have another hard drive. And then before you know it, you've been on this journey for some of you yourselves, I'm sure, that it just ramps up each part through this journey. It's a bit of a money pit. But because of that, you need to make sure that the work that you are going to sell in the cafe to your family, you should be looking at seeing some return on that investment that you have had, even as people working in the amateur space for friends and family. And one of the things as professionals we encourage each other to do is to go beyond shoot and burn and to added value through the albums and frame prints and the likes, because that's the difference between a USB and a disc, which no one can access in 10, 20 years' time. You know what I mean? The only way you can see pictures are going to be actually on the wall or some form of permanence. So I think we owe it to generations to not get stuck in this digital black hole, potentially. Proper PPE and presenting yourself and car properly are things that I also think are really important working professionals. Might just push on a little bit quicker. One of the things I think here, to work in the professional space, you'll also, I believe, need to understand your craft. And that quite often when I was at Polytech, you might laugh at this here, I had a lot of students who would say, oh, I love doing candid. Well, they did, because they didn't know how to pose, or I love natural light. Well, there's nothing wrong with natural light when it's used properly. But if you don't know how to use reflectors or flash, that's just a cop-out. And so as a person working in industry, that's kind of almost expected. Okay, so you need to have some education in order to get up to speed to know what's the tool in my toolkit that I can pull out to use for the right opportunity for a wedding or a family shoot or 21st or whatever, as opposed to think, I just have to deal with what's in that room, which might be muddy and grey or colour cast from tungsten or whatever. Solid business plan. Again, I won't dwell on that too much. I also suggest building a brand. It's really important going forward if you're going to be working in industry, is to get yourself an identity, be it through logos, colours, trading name, and then to trademark those. And for anyone that's involved, kind of relates to the question I had before with law, it's important to protect your own brand identity, which in New Zealand is relatively easy to do through Intellectual Property Office of New Zealand, IPONS. So you pay a fee and you put it into a category. It could be wedding photography or whatever. And anyone can do this. This could be plumbers or whatever, you know. It's not particular to photography. And you don't need a lawyer to do it. You can pay intellectual property lawyers for this, absolutely, but you don't need to. You can do this through the site here yourself. And that just gives you a little bit of protection for a brand, like for a slogan or a trading name that you can actually have unique to yourself, you know, whether it's Bright Lights Photography Limited or whatever it happens to be. No one else can actually trade on that, which gives you leverage to then advertise it knowing that that's unique to you. You can't, however, trademark universal terms. You can't trademark wedding photographer. That's too broad. You can't do that. I think I won't cover this actually. I put this in our professional conference, not to get people thinking more than anything. And I've put in there part-time photography is a bit like half a whole or half a doctor. It's like, and what I mean by that is you either are or you aren't. To be working in industry, you can't kind of, well, I kind of am, but I'm not. You know, I kind of am. You're either a photographer and capable, or you're not. So you're either good enough to take the pictures, in which case you either need to be confident because you've got the skill set, because you've done the training, like you were out tonight with Lightroom, and you've been to courses and you've done all these things. So my encouragement to you is that even though you may be working in a non-professional space and have other jobs, you know, if you're good enough, you're good enough. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to feel second best to a photographer like myself or another one else if you've got that skill set and warrant doing it. It can be a bit of a trap because, as some of you may have found out, is that let's say you want to do weddings and work on a Saturday afternoon in summer, you don't actually go out and answer the phone and emails on a Saturday afternoon for your wedding clients. That happens 9, 10 months, 2 years before, on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you know. So to do that part-time work, the commitment is actually beyond, you kind of get drawn into this trap and you kind of end up giving more. And anyone that's done several part-time jobs will know 2 part-time jobs don't equal a whole, because driving to one job, driving back, that alone, let alone a meeting and a staff meeting and all that, emails and this, emails that, they add up to being bigger than just one job alone. And that's no different to working in photography. Which comes back to the whole reason why we're doing it in the first place, which I said to you on that sort of first or second slide. Why am I going out to sell my pictures and weddings and portraits? Because actually I can get suckered into this and actually giving a lot more, which means I'm not enjoying it. So coming back to think, well, if that's what you want, fill your boots. Do you know what I mean? But just be clear in your own mind, because once you start doing it for money, sometimes that enjoyment can be robbed of it. So being clear in your own mind. Does that make sense? Yeah. If you're keen, and I'll say this to you there, look, then go out there and do it. And do it with gusto. And you that know this guy here, you realise, you know, that if you've watched the programs on TV with these guys in SAS Australia, you know, they'll push and push and push, and, you know, you do the concourse and they come back knackered and they think you're only halfway through, go do it again. And like, you dig deep enough, you'll find the energy and the drive to do it. And I think it's a little bit like that working industry, that just when you think it's too much, you've probably still got a bit more to give, you know, and that's what it takes sometimes for any small business, let alone photography, is to push yourself that bit harder, and then you kind of reap that reward for working. One of the other things as well that you'll find, again, particular, by no means to photography, but general, is we often have many hats as small business holders, and that we need to work out what are our strengths and our weaknesses and who can help us fill some of these other roles. And, you know, you might find that you don't actually like the computer work, you know, you don't like the accounting, or you don't like the social media. Well, there's people out there that can help take over those roles. And yes, you'll pay them, I'm sure. But you don't have to do all these things if you don't feel it's you, or you don't like them, or you're not good at them. So we don't always have to wear the hats that we think we do. Probably a big one for you guys, I think, is knowing your worth and that you're okay saying no. And I'll put this slide on here because I think they might have a laugh. You know, we've all had those sort of clients and people that kind of keep pestering us. They want to see the pictures. I only took them this morning, for goodness sake. Just wait. You know, the social media and digital age, people think because they can, they should. No, you shouldn't. You know, sometimes keeping a little bit of magic back, and no, it's going to take me 5 days. Well, I do nothing. Do you know what I mean? But that's okay. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not why you do nothing. It's the magic of post-production. But sometimes you make a ride for your own back because it can happen quickly. Sometimes life takes over and you get busy and you can't deliver. So we have to be clear with our clients sometimes and educate them that there is a process that we follow, that it doesn't come straight out of a camera, and these things take time to give a good product. Not everyone's your customer, and I think for a lot of people in the room today, you may have had experience with this where, you know, you work for an ad, and there was a certain magazine that used to be very dominant in this market where photographers would go out and shoot social pages, and the photographer would get a quarter-page spread in the back, but it never worked. They never got any work from it. So they kind of got this hook and this sink and this line to draw people in that work for an ad in this magazine. But those photographers never lasted because they couldn't get work, therefore they kind of dropped off the radar. So sometimes we're working in industry where it's very easy to be getting your name out there, or a freebie or a contra, or sometimes it's actually a case saying, you know what, that doesn't work for me. You know, what pays my bill when I go to the supermarket, if I tell them I'm going to sweep the floor out the back for half an hour, they'll laugh. You know, it doesn't work. They want cash on the till to get your milk and the bread off the counter to take and put it in the car. When I fill up at BP, they want money through my card to fill up my gas tank. They don't want me to, you know, go and tell my friends how good BP is. It doesn't work, does it? You know, and that kind of word of mouth and saying good things. So knowing your worth, knowing your value, knowing that what you do has value is really, really important for yourself, but also for your peers and for the industry. And I think if there's one message there to spread around with you is that don't underestimate what you do for your friends and family, you know. You might laugh at that one too. Or this one. Because after a while, that's the commitment you have. You've got gear that's spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and you spend hours and hours trying to learn it all. You know, and at the end of the day, people will want you to go and do these things for next to nothing. And after a while, you'll get a bit resentful. You'll be a bit upset about it because, actually, I'm sick of doing this. I like taking pictures, but not for every man and their dog that I know in my family that thinks I can be the family photographer at every event. It'd be nice for someone else to do that sometimes, you know. And I've had that a wee bit with my wife's family, with nieces and nephews. And one of the things I've learned now is that I will say to them, I'm happy to give them an hour for free if it's pre-ceremony, and it's for no money. I say, look, I'll give it to you as a gift for 1 hour, my time for free, and but I won't be your main photographer. You need to hire someone for the main pictures. If you want to do bridal stuff beforehand, before the ceremony, yes, you can. I can do that for you. But if you want the rest of the stuff covered, there's someone else on the ticket. That frees me up for the rest of the day to be with family, and it means that I'm enjoying the event. It also means they get something for free, and they can, you know, still use your services and stuff like that. But the whole job, if I'm going to not work for what I do for a job, I'm not going to do it for nothing because my buddy nephew's too tight to buddy pay for it. Because who else is going to give them a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 present? The parents might, but I'm not their parents. You know what I mean? Like, it's a pretty big ask when you think about it. And it's the same with family portraits or newborn photos or whatever you might be asked to do. There is a value in that. And if you do it for one, there's a good chance you may be asked to do it for others. And it's very hard at that stage to pull back and think, okay, I did it for Mary, did it for Sue, but I'm not doing it for Amanda. So just be aware that when you're on that journey, these are some of the things you may just want to look a bit further ahead to what you do and don't do. Proper planning prevents poor performance. So this is one of the things that I've found working in industry is a bit of a game changer here as well. And that is knowing where I'm going, what the light's going to be doing, what my gear's going to be doing. I've got my car filled up. I've got my cards formatted before I get there. I've had photo pills on my phone app to know, okay, lighting, sunset tonight is okay, it's going to be here. I've looked at the weather, okay, that's going to happen. I've got a backup plan if it's wet. I know the route between A to B because that's the best way here. Go on the motorway, turn off, go here, right, 15 minutes, that's good. Spoken to the drivers, if it's a wedding, spoken to, if it's a portrait session, we're changing locations, everyone knows where we're going. It's a really crucial step to success, that if you can get your clients on board well planned and you know what you're doing, you're halfway there. It means you're in and out and you do a good job. And I think we've covered this a wee bit in my previous one. Probably not so relevant to what we're talking about tonight, but again, the industry we have is ever evolving. It's evolving around me as I speak. The wedding market's changed. I mean, I haven't really understood it, and people I first started out with are all going, we don't know what's going on either. We haven't got the same amount of wedding bookings. Is it COVID? Is it because we're getting older? And it's international, and all these things are happening. Once upon a time, when I first started shooting weddings 22 years ago, probably a quarter to a third of revenue was from after-sale prints, and none of that happens now because most people are giving files, let alone they're actually giving prints, but there's certainly not the opportunity for on-selling that there used to be. So it's no one's fault because it's happened everywhere. It's happened globally. It's just the change from film to digital, and then the evolution of more people. Therefore, how do you compete? Well, you give something more, and it comes cheaper. As an industry, it's evolved, and I guess like it or lump it, you've got to move on from it. And I guess it's moving around us all the whole time. Probably the last thing is probably really good for you guys because we're kind of doing this already, and I think your commitment to CPS and the Photographic Society of New Zealand and your award system and what you do with workshops, you're kind of you're on the same journey as a lot of us that are working full-time, and that is your personal projects are really important. And there's a couple here I'll share with you. And in COVID, I think a lot of us probably got holed up and were a bit rusty. And certainly I did, and I kind of got a bit stuck. And I was working with a business coach at the time, and one of the things he said was that action cures inaction. And kind of a fairly obvious adage, but it's true, in that you don't know what you're going to do, but do something, do anything. Get yourself off the couch, get yourself out of the house, and just do something. And it's the process of starting and putting one foot in front of the other is the win. And then you'll think, oh, yeah, okay, I could do this. So I went on holiday, and if you've been up to Motueka, some of you may recognise the Janie Seddon shipwreck on the foreshore at Motueka. And I thought, oh, that's quite cool. So I wonder if I could take pictures of that. I thought, I wonder where else there's some shipwrecks. And of course at Quail Island, if you haven't been over on the south side of Quail Island, there's a whole graveyard of wrecked ships. So off I went there and got my camera, nearly drowned. I really was nearly drowned. Bird shit in my shoulder. And that's the result of the Janie Seddon in Motueka. And then Quail Island. So again, just sort of forcing yourself out and just seeing what you can come up with is enough sometimes to get that inspiration and passion and drive back into it. And the other one we did, and I can't really show you any more than this, and the guys at conference at NZIP saw this, but you're welcome to look at this web link. And you can take a picture of this if you want it. So In Pursuit of Giants, these are all photographer friends from NZIP, from all around the country. Basically, Richard, fella here, do you know about the Canterbury cat? The panther, the mysterious panther? Yeah, well, it's all stems from this. And anyway, Richard said, oh, this buddy, it was on the radio or on the TV about this Canterbury cat. And I said, I've seen it, which is true. And a few years ago, bounded across the road when we were up in Peel Forest. Well, buddy, look on his face. He was so very excited to think that you've seen this Canterbury cat. We go find it. So it doesn't work that way. No one's ever kind of found this cat. It doesn't live in a place. It kind of people just see bits of it now and again and stuff. And then people have seen it in Hallswell Quarry and in Hamner and all sorts, and we don't know what it is. Right, Richard, we'll go and have a look. So it turned out to be just a hunting trip. We just wanted to go into the hills. And we said, okay, we'll go somewhere and have a look for a bloody cat. But we'll shoot a deer or something at the same time. So we went off up back at Rangatata, and we got a few other people, and there was 9 of us flew in. And we all took camera gear, and you'll see there's a video that we've made. It's a 55-minute documentary, and this web page will show you the video. So if you want to take the web link and have a look at it, you can just see some of the crazy stuff we did. So we went out and had a look for this Canterbury cat because Richard wanted to have a look. Well, bugger me if we didn't see these big paw prints. We didn't see the cat. And if you're keen to have a look, then have a look at the video. That kind of tells the whole story behind it. But so that was kind of like one of those things that we use photography and our shared interest of it to go out there and do something that was just a bit of fun, have a few whiskies, have a shoot, and have a bit of a laugh. And at the moment, we had such a good time that we're kind of looking, what can we do? What can we do next time? I don't know if we can beat it, but we'll see what we can do. So anyway, personal projects. Right, I think we're about an hour. Any questions? Oh, yeah.
We're going to use the mic so people can hear it. You're next. Hello? Is the mic going? Yep. Right. They had to turn it on down the back. Several years ago, I was at a workshop, and at the end of the evening, over lots of whiskies, there were a bunch of us there who were all professionals in various industries and different things all over the place. And we all came to the same conclusion over a whiskey, so it may not be a particularly valid conclusion, but we were all thinking about, if I went and became a professional photographer, the concern was that in our own little industries, we'd, over multiple years, kind of lost the passion we had when we were 21. And we still enjoyed whatever it was we did. We still made money and it was cool and we weren't going to stop it. But we all kind of said, I don't want to go and be a professional photographer because I don't want to lose the passion that I've got now.
Yeah, totally.
Does that...
Absolutely, and I guess that's a really strong message of tonight. What's the rudder? What's the driver? What is your reason for doing it? Because if it's to make money, you need to make money, which means you're going to do things you're not going to want to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're going to get asked to take pictures of bloody milk bottles. Well, that doesn't spin my... Do you know what I mean? Like, but that's what you do is a phone call comes and you're a photographer. Well, that's your job. You can't just do the glamorous stuff with models in Rarotonga or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you've got to understand what your driver is to get out of bed in the morning. And if it's passionate about taking pictures, it doesn't matter what it is. Well, that's great. But if you've got things that you kind of think, well, actually, that's not really my cup of tea. This is the kind of the business, the bones of your business. And having that kind of mental discussion, and it's not just with you, but it's also with your family. Because if you're going to embark on this journey, you've got to work out, well, okay, you're taking other people with you, kids and wife and husbands, all that kind of stuff. They've got to be part of that. Okay, what is your income going to be? Does that mean you're going to be working nights and weekends? How does it all come together? So sharing that drive and that goal is really, really important. And sometimes, and it sounds like I'm putting you off, I'm not. But you're right that if you think you're going to lose the passion, it's not worth the risk.
So do you think that the passion that most successful professional photographers have is running a business, or is it photography?
No, because most of them can't run a business. Well, no, that's not fair. That's not fair. But a lot of them are tortured artists, and I'm not picking on people, but there's people that are very, very good photographers, way much better than me, who struggle. And it's because they love what they're doing, but they're not necessarily working in a commercial space, and it's a really hard one for people, so that it's a very real thing for some of them, and others that are doing really well for themselves aren't the best photographers and piss other people off because, well, they're shit house, but they're making lots of money, so, well, that's the thing, So knowing where you stand, knowing what you got to offer, and is and where you're fitting into all that kind of stuff's crucial.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, that's a touch.
I kind of thought of another one just then.
Oh, you're far away. We've got 2 hours. Kidding.
Oh, God. Yeah, so like I hate editing, and like if you get pressure to do a shoot and you're like, right, I need X amount of images for the paper in like 2 days' time, and you've got like 2,000 images to go through. Like,
We'll stop you there. Excellent images, 2 days' time, 2 hours' time.
yeah.
You know, so that's a very different ballgame, isn't it? You know, I used to say this at students at Polytech. You know, you had 6 weeks to come up with an essay of 10 images. That's rubbish. I shot 3,000 images today, and I need them sorted for clients the next 2 days. Do you know what I mean? It's a very different ballgame, working for the things that you want versus reality. You know, which is a wedding. You know, you shoot on a Saturday, and you might shoot anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 files. Edited down, you might give them a series of 500. Well, some of those they want, first looks on Monday. Whatever you've sold in your package, you might have a gallery going up early next week. Or you hear the horror stories of 6 months and we still haven't seen pictures, and it just pisses people off. So understanding your market, and again where you're fitting in and what you're offering and what you're selling, always undersell, over deliver would be the other adage.
So how do you like keep the stress down and not get burnt out from like sitting in front of the computer?
Oh, that's whiskey. Well, but this is knowing your craft. This is having this. The whole kind of thing ties in together. And if you can sort of go a bit further up and see the overview of what we said tonight, I think it marries in together. That is, be good at what you're doing, know your craft, understand those decisions of why you're in business, get good at it, practice, buy the best gear, plan, and all those sorts of things. Okay, if you're going to be, the stress comes from your own ability to deliver, and that's deadline, that's ability, and those sorts of things. The ability to stress yourself might be because if you're working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, shooting on a Saturday, you've got post-production, when's that going to happen? Monday night. Well, I've got kids' sport, and then I've got a meeting to go to. It's like, well, when were you expecting to do post-production? So you kind of set yourself up to fail if you think you're going to show people images on Wednesday without having the time frame in your own organisation. So your own planning behind the scenes is really crucial. You might say, okay, I can deliver that within 3 weeks. So setting that expectation with your clients is really good. And that slide I said before, your client rings up and wants it yesterday. Well, no, educate them. You're not going to get it yesterday. I'm going to give it to you in 3 weeks. But you know that you mean 2 weeks. Undersell, over deliver. You tell them 3 because that's realistic. There's a bit of fat in the system, but give them in 2 weeks. Well, that's ahead of schedule. That's a win to them, but it also means that you can deliver.
Yep, I agree. Also, so you say point of difference. Like I did a small business project management course last year.
Yep.
As a photographer, like my view is that everybody's seen everything, done everything 10 times over. Like, how do you get a point of difference when everybody has done it before?
It's tough. Yeah, it is tough. And I don't know if I've probably got the answer to that, So the risk is, if you don't know what it is, you're just the next cab on the rank. So what are you going to do to compete with the next person? Well, there's only one thing you've got left to compete on, which is what? Price. So the only thing, if I can take a picture of a headshot, and you can take a picture of a headshot, and you can take a picture, headshot, then, okay, how much is yours? Oh, I'll do it for $100. I'll do it for 90, 80, 70. Well, that's the only thing you've got to compete with. However, if you have invested in maybe a lighting kit, well, have you seen my headshots? They're very different to hers because I'm using 3 lights, back light, front light, all that kind of stuff, and I've got backgrounds. And, if you can kind of develop something that's perhaps a little bit more unique, then your headshot still may be 100 and yours is 100, but it's not 70, 60, 50, and yours has got the fancy lighting. Yours is now you're giving client a choice, and it's a real choice. Do you know what I mean? But it's something that a lot of people find really hard because, if you've got this person, and they've been here already for 10 years, what are you going to do that's different? But sometimes it's not, sometimes it's the market that's different, Sometimes your point of difference is, particularly in a bridal thing, you are 22, just got married, understand what brides want. you know? I might be doing stuff that's crusty, but I don't know it. Do you know what I mean? You're I, and you might be going with all the cool kids and, you know. Have you ever seen Jonathan Suckling? If you haven't, he's a bit of a clown, but he's a photographer working in the North Island. So Google Jonathan Suckling and actually, hang on. I don't know if I can do it. It'll take me too long to get it onto the internet and stuff. But he's a photographer who's hardcore. He used to be a dancer, but he's turning up to wedding shoots and prancing around, doing backflips. You've probably seen the stuff on stuff, you know. So you're hiring an entertainer, a jester in one sense, you know. So he's well known for this. So his pictures look the same as the next one, but what you're getting is this character that's turning up that you know you're going to go on a shoot with him, it's going to be a bloody box of frogs. Do you know what I mean? Albeit a little bit about him, but it's quite a different experience. Do you know what I mean? You know? Yeah. I'm not sure I'm answering, but I'm giving you some ideas and sort of trying to lead you. Yeah. And the other thing is, like, some of us do like teams and stuff. Well, I just do bog standard teams. But if you look at some of the guys in the States, what they're doing clear-cut individuals, you know, set with sort of fire going on behind them. There's a lot more post-production, but no one's doing it here. The question then is, okay, is it economic for a $12, $15, $20 picture to do that, to clear-cut 15 people, merge them, do backgrounds? Well, I'm not convinced of it, but maybe that's your point of difference. Maybe you get some of the green screen software and start merging these things together. That might be your point of difference. No one's done it yet. Who does funeral photography? Well, you might laugh, and no one's doing it. You know, what are the two occasions that people come together? Weddings and funerals, albeit there's one less at the funeral, do you know what I mean? But same fee, isn't it? Yeah. But do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not being morbid about that, but that is an opportunity where people are coming and travelling. You know, like for some families, that's really important. You know, so I'm not saying you go up to the bloody casket and get family. I'm talking about the opportunity that with people coming together, you're working with a funeral director. No one's done it. So there's a point of difference. Now, they might be doing it for good reason. Maybe it doesn't work. But, you know, there's two ideas I've given you already tonight that I'm not doing, you can take away.
I was just going to follow up on one of Tasha's questions, like setting expectations for your clients and knowing what they actually want. I've done a few shoots for people and they really have no idea what they actually want. And I've probably got a better idea what they're going to use it for, and so I can.
And what market? What market are we talking here?
Industrial.
Industrial. Yeah.
Would you like add that sort of stuff into a contract? Like explain what people are going to get up front. You said 500 shots for a wedding. I'm going, holy shit, that's like a week's photography for me. But do you set those expectations up front?
Yes and no. Yeah, like if I work for Anna at Trimble and we go into a product show, I don't ever say to them, well, I'm going to give you 350 shots and there's going to be 10 of this, 12 of that, and you know, so many verticals, so many. No, because I don't know myself, you know. Part of it is communication, is working with an art director or with a client or a product rep or manager or whoever it happens to be, to work out what are you actually asking. And so the most important part of that process is the questions beforehand and the emails and ring up on the phone. Okay, yeah, and there's so many barbs to these things with clients. You know, I had a lady today ring up. I want you to photograph some painting. Okay, of what? How big is it? Is it gloss? Is it watercolor? Well, it turns out it was oil. She said, I'm 5 foot, I'm about the same height, and it's a bit wider. So, okay, so it's a life-size picture, and it's in oils, therefore it's a shiny surface, so therefore it's going to be big, and what are you going to use it for? To sell. Okay, catalogue, is it going to be on the back of a bus? You know, so again, it's just trying to pull this stuff out of people. They kind of know, but they haven't told you. You know, and that's like most client stuff, you know, they kind of do know, they just don't think to tell you what's important. Okay, so it turned out this copy work was a piece of artwork on oils that's been freshly painted. She hasn't varnished it yet, but she's going to, but she's not going to do it till after pictures now. Life size and single capture. We don't have to do any polarizing work because not the shiny. And she's going to put it on the web page, so it doesn't have to be high quality, maybe a reproduction, A3. Okay, she never told me any of that. but you're just trying to get this, blood out of a stone to work out, okay, I can probably help you with that now, okay? As opposed to, we're going to go and put it down the side of Barbados Street on, full size on a building where every pixel is going to be seen and all that kind of stuff, and oils and acrylics and behind glass and all that. So with your clients, it's often about having that dialogue. And I said before, it's about personality. It's not about photography. Get in front of them, have a meeting, have a coffee. What is it you're wanting? How can I help you? What is it you're needing? That's the discussion that's going to determine the success of what you're going to deliver and to match up the expectations. In terms of contracting, you may wish to, and sometimes I'll contract what I don't do more than what I do. Okay, if you want me to photograph this artwork, great. One setup, on-site, studio lighting, non-reflective surfaces. I'll turn up and he goes, oh, by the way, I've just got this. Oh, that's great. Here's the one behind glass, which I kind of just was trying to find out before, and I said, okay, I'll do it for, so many $100 a piece. Well, I've already told her that, and she pulls out this extra one. I think, well, actually, so sometimes it's about being clear, not what you do, but what you don't do,
So this is not so much a question, it's more a comment. It carries on onto that relationship that you build with clients, and like me as a client for a company, what matters the most is that you make it easy. So for example, when I come up with a brief, you're the one who asks me all the right questions. What do we do when it's raining? What is the person wearing? Do you have a backup model? Then you organize, let's go for a location, search, and you happily do that, and you look like, really engaged. And then the photo shoot actually you make easy because you within 20 minutes on the ground and rolling and crawling between the...
like Jonathan Suckling, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, as a client, what matters the most is that relationship, and that we actually really trust you, that you will do the job, and as you say, under promise and over deliver. Where I actually end up with 2,000 photos, where I was happy with 500. But that relationship for me as a client is the most important, because you just make it simple.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that means a lot to me as well. But you realise from that there, running on the ground, well, that comes from passion, because I like what I'm doing. Well, we can turn up to a location, and if I've got the toolkit, because I've learnt my craft properly, it has got overcast. We didn't plan for that. What am I going to do? I need to pull something out of the bag here. Well, what am I going to use? Okay, a bit of fill flash here. We'll put a reflector here. We're going to put a bit lighter background over there. We're going to wait for... Sun will drop behind the clouds in a minute. Okay, we'll turn this way here. We've got a bit more dark pines. It's going to be a dark background, light coloured clothing. The skill set and the toolkit that you're going to bring to it, that comes from experience because you've trained yourself and you've invested in yourself and not just your gear, allows you to have that confidence. So the whole thing, again, comes back to the first things we're saying. It's all interrelated, you know what I mean? And,
Where you actually now know that when you take a photo for me, that you have to give me lots of sky. Because
correct,
I'm
yeah.
and I'm going to put some writing.
Yeah.
That comes from, now knowing us as a client.
Correct. And this comes back to what we were saying before, is that communication. Like if I don't ask the question, what are you going to use the photos for? Well, I'm going to take the picture, which for me as the photographer is best this. You as the graphic designer know that at a trade stand in Idaho selling a product, there's a pull-up banner that the person's going to have that's going to be 3 meters, and my photo is going to be in the bottom third, and my picture, I don't want to take it with so much sky because it's not balanced, but the need that you have is real. So I need to understand, to meet your need, I need to break out what I think is good composition, because this is the thing here, but understanding that is about delivering and meeting expectations through communication. Yeah, you're right.
What do you say to a young person getting into this who undersells himself? Here we go. Fair enough. Hope we all learned that. I'll tell that. My daughter's into she's a marketing person, and she met a friend who she got involved doing a photo shoot for a restaurant in town. They asked her to do some product shots. She ended up reshooting the whole menu, doing all the stuff on the interior, and et cetera, and charged them $150. because she
So
thought
she redid it because the first lot wasn't good.
no, she did. Their stuff was rubbish, and Kendra came and asked her. My daughter asked her if she would come and have a look, and she went in there. The manager of the restaurant saw her coming, basically.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
and then just said, "Oh, you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this," and all she asked for was what she originally said. So, to me, it was I was gobsmacked when I heard the story, but I thought, somebody like that needs some assistance and guidance and whatever from something like, you guys basically.
Yeah.
How
So
do you do that?
am I correct? She was ripped off, or she charged too little for what was required.
Well,
Was it the
she
essence?
charged way too little. They didn't.
Yeah.
They paid her what she asked for.
Yeah,
was
yeah.
what she said she was going to do, but she grossly over delivered the product.
Yeah.
And didn't add up the price because she wasn't bold enough, and they just saw her coming. And
So it's a classic kind of rookie mistake in one
Yeah.
sense. And I guess this is the trap that will happen, particularly with the clientele we have here tonight, because you'll get lent on for your skill set without really knowing what it's worth. So I guess in one sense, that is the danger. And I guess coming along tonight is to kind of encourage you to have some value of your own work without telling you what to charge, And I think $150, the problem with that is that what do you get paid per week working at BP or whatever job you have that fills your Monday to Friday? Relatively 150. Well, that's the whole day's. If I work at behind the salon, wherever, that might be a day's wages or something. So the relativity of it sounds like a lot of money potentially, or if you're a student, I'm on bones of my ass and I'm struggling to put food in my mouth, $150 is welcome, The reality is that's nowhere close to what the job is worth if they were to hire a professional, because we can't run a business on that, That might be a quarter of an hour charge out time, let alone 3 hours shooting and post-production and running a car and all that kind of stuff, So there's education there, and I guess that's where relationships are really important. Comes back to the first thing, personality. If you can't relate to people, other photographers, get on the phone. This is where you'll kind of almost be the end of your own demise, or your own demise, because you'll make these mistakes, but you don't get to make too many of them at that kind of rate, But we've all done it, so I can't, it's unfair to say that she's at fault, because, I know we've all done it. She won't do it again, though, will she?
no, she's been told.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
How much would you have charged for that job?
Well, again, without me understanding the full brief, it's a bit hard to say. But I mean, I charge in the vicinity of about $430 an hour as a guide. You know what I mean? Now, some people might laugh at that, and some people might say it's too cheap, some people say it's too dear. But as a working professional, that's roughly. There's other people that out there will say, well, actually, that's me charging it an hour. You shouldn't be doing that either. You should be charging for image use, which is also correct. So there's a component of that within that fee that I've just mentioned. But I mean, I'm not going to sort of get all defensive and secretive, because if I don't tell you, you don't know. Therefore, you perpetuate that kind of same mistake. But Dietrich Van Heinigen might charge $600 an hour. Next person might be $200, but that's the kind of ballpark.
Could you elaborate a little bit about the image ownership that you mentioned earlier?
Well, I work so that I own everything I shoot, because I believe it's my right as a creative professional. So I don't want someone else to own my work. And look, I mean, is it precious? Maybe, but I just morally think anything I create should be mine. Now, the stuff I do for personal work, well, that's mine as of rights, because no one else has asked me to take it. But client work, there's several reasons. As we sort of said before, if you can't claim ownership of something you don't own, therefore, in terms of the billing parameters, then it's really important for you to have that security. The moral part of it's really huge. Is the author, but also if you do a campaign, let's say for telecom, and they love that kind of lovely misty kind of backlight and the sort of the essence of what you managed to capture, well, telecom own that. They own that style, not just the pictures, but the kind of the way you've done it. They would have every right that if you went and pulled out the same trick for Telstra Clear or whatever happens to be, to say, hang on, you can't do that. But you say, well, this is what I do for a job. They hired me because they like what I did for you. That's why they hired me. But you say, So I can't even if I don't own my own work, I can't even do an exhibition or publish a book. If that's now, if I went to clients and say, look, would you mind if I published a book? Most of them say, yeah, fill your boots. They wouldn't care. But I have to go and ask them, which kind of seems a bit wrong. And that's the default position in copyright law, unless you contract out of it.
I don't think I quite follow that. So by default, you own you are the owner of your photo.
By default, in law, the 1994 Copyright Act states that the commissioner of photography, the person who commissions the picture, owns it.
Right.
So if I have a client that says, Tony, can you take a picture of my wedding, my house, my company, they will by default own the work from the time the shutter is pressed. Okay.
Right.
If it's personal work, well, I am my own commissioner. I am the person saying, go out and take a picture. Okay.
It's always good to try to opt out of that.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. And if I'm being really honest with you, it's a minefield that people don't understand, and people have preconception of copyright, and some people get a bit, I've got to have you don't have to have copyright, like, and most people are all bush lawyers and think they know, sometimes it just takes a little bit of education for clients and amongst ourselves as photographers to just get our heads around it.
Cool. Anybody else? Well, Tony, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Your timing's perfect as well, and
okay.
I'd say come and have a cup of coffee. I'm not going to say that tonight, so sorry. But thank you again. That was really fantastic. Everybody, thanks very much to Tony.
Thank you. Well, good. Thank you.
Like I said before, there's no cup of tea, so feel free to mill around and come and accost Tony with other questions. A couple of other points that I want to remind everybody of, and this is relating to all the stuff over here. Remember, all the prints that you've got an acceptance or above throughout the year, they need to be handed in to go into the final competition for the year. There's a bunch in the box there. Next week is the last week to bring them. Equally, next week's the last week to bring back the awards that you got last year so that you can polish them up and have them ready to go. So please come next week with your photographs and with your polished prizes. Thanks again.